Hello and welcome to this summer version of You Are My Boro. I'm joined as ever by Dom Shaw, my fellow writer of The Echo. Hiya, Dom.
Hiya, Scott. You all right?
Summering well?
Back to it after a week or so off, eh?
Good. Yeah, to be fair, we both had a week off. So we're both back to it now. And we're going to catch up on all things Boro. Obviously, there's been bits and bobs of things happening in the last couple of weeks in terms of the fixture list, obviously. Transfers kind of bubbling along, although obviously no one actually through the door as yet. And the players back at Rockcliffe Park this morning for the start of pre-season training. So we'll touch on all of that. As ever, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe on the video below, or drop us a message if you're listening to this on one of the podcast versions. We've got a couple of guests lined up. We'll have one at the back end of this week, all being well, and hopefully one next week as the summer progresses. And then obviously not long after that, we'll be into pre-season games that we can get our teeth into and speak all things Boro. But, Dom, as we look ahead to the season, there is now a new season to look forward to. The fixtures are out. So let's have a look at what we've got to look forward to in terms of the start of the campaign. I mean, how important do you think this is? Because there's two schools of thought here, isn't there? One school of thought is, well, you've got to play everybody twice in a season. You know, what will be, will be. But I think I'm more of the factor that actually, no, the way the fixtures fall can have quite a big impact on the way that the season plays out.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And I think like there's the excitement factor, first of all. You can start your planning and kind of, you know, truly put last season behind you, can't you, when you have the makeup of the season to come. But I think I think 2 minutes, I've got my little lad here who's decided to tell me he's hungry, but he can I'm sure
the joys of working from home.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, yeah, I definitely think that you know, you can read into it. Now, it's funny in that I was having a good dig through the fixtures, and you look at the back end of the season, and I think there's Hull, Leeds, Watford on the final days.
Cardiff the last away game, yeah.
Yeah. And I find myself looking at that thinking, well, that could be a tricky finish. And yet, like, really, how the hell do we know what's going to be a tricky finish at this stage? So that's where I think you maybe look into it like more than what you can do, really.
What you can, yeah.
But I think the start, definitely. And I think it's not a bad start for Boro, that.
It looks it on paper, doesn't it?
Yeah, a home game to start is what you want, first of all, isn't it? Coventry away second is obviously, again, you know, I know their team like the back of our hand. At least we'll get the Coventry views and comments again on here.
Yeah, straight away.
And then obviously Neil Warnock in the cup, which it had to be, didn't it? It just had to be. And
Neil twice as well. First month.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it could be a lot worse, that start.
I think it's always nice to have a home game first. I mean, you know, ultimately, like we say, it's the luck of the draw. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. But I you know, to start and finish at home, I think is pretty much what you'd want. And then, like you say, you know, Coventry away is going to be a tough first away game. Although let's see where they're at in terms of Gyökeres and Hamer and other players. Obviously, we're not going up. And then, like you say, Neil Warnock coming back to the Riverside straight after. But yeah, I think if nothing else, the chance to kind of, you know, get the ball rolling, get off on the front foot at home. You know, you would imagine a pretty packed Riverside. Hopefully the sun's shining. You know, that feels like a decent way to get the ball rolling, doesn't it?
I think so. I think your home game's what you want to start, isn't it? And I know, you know, you could look and think, well, a team coming down or a you know, Sunderland, which you're never going to get on the first game, but you know, that real kind of sense of occasion. But I think, like you say there, that first game looks after itself, really. It's a home game. It's a chance to get points on the board, and then you go to Coventry next. Coventry are kind of a bit of a great unknown, really, haven't they? But like, I don't know. I think it'd be more of a surprise if Coventry were able to repeat last season's success than if than if they weren't. And as you say, there's the unknown of Gyökeres and a couple of other players.
Well, there's the chance, isn't there, that by the middle of August, you've got players there who are probably going to be on their way out, but haven't yet left yet. I mean, Boro have been in that situation on a number of occasions, haven't they, where they've gone into the season with players that are actually going to be leaving, and they kind of, go through the motions almost for the first 2 or 3 games, then sure enough, leave in the last week of August. And you wonder if Coventry might be in that situation with the likes of, as I say, Gyökeres or a Hamer or someone like that in the middle of August, that they're potentially still there, but we won't know that they won't be come the end of the month.
Yeah, exactly. And I think looking further through, the other things you look for are obviously the Sunderland and Leeds fixtures now, and then the Christmas period as well. And it's Rotherham away Boxing Day, isn't it? Which
we'll have a look at those here, yeah.
It's not a home game, but that's a good Boxing Day away game, isn't it? You're going to get...
Yeah, if you're going to have to travel on Boxing Day as a fan, then you might, Rotherham's about as good as you're going to get, isn't it? What, an hour down the road, not much more than that, in and out, you know what I mean? Back in time for the turkey sandwiches for tea time, that's not so bad.
And I know, I've already touched on it, that end, but that Leeds home game late in the season, you already look at, don't you, and think that could be tasty. It could be a fair bit on the line there.
I think this year the in-between one in Christmas is quite interesting. Boro at Huddersfield on December the 29th. That's actually a Friday. I think those are all Friday night games. Because by playing Friday night, that then enables the Championship to have games on New Year's Day, because the Premier League is sticking to the Saturday. So unless the game gets moved for TV, don't have games on New Year's Day. But yeah, as things stand, and again, obviously all of these games could get moved for TV. We know that. But as things stand, Boro at Huddersfield on the Friday night in between Christmas and New Year, and then home to Coventry on New Year's Day.
Yeah, and you said there about the TV games that you do look at Boro. I was saying that there are so many clubs now in the Championship this year. How many games are Leeds going to get moved for TV? Chef Wed's probably going to get a load because they've got such a big audience as well.
As that kind of sort of unfolds, yeah.
Yeah, but you do look at Boro and Sunderland and think, that a fair few of those games, we saw it at the end of last season, didn't we? I know there was a lot on the line, but there was so many moved then. You fully expect that to be the case again. But yeah, it feels real now, doesn't it? Pre-season, a couple of weeks, a week or so away before the games start.
It does.
Yeah, before we know it, Gary Rowett and Millwall are at the Riverside.
Yeah, and on we go on. And then, as you touched on, to finish, and I take your point completely, predicting the Championship is the quickest way to the poor house if you're going to put money on it. But so, it's pointless really reflecting on where teams are going to be at come the end of the season. But final away game, Cardiff, it's obviously a long trek, but at this stage, you'd be surprised if Cardiff were really involved in the promotion mix. But then that last home game at home to Watford, who knows with Watford, but that's got the potential to be an interesting one, hasn't it?
Yeah, Watford are one of those great unknowns, weren't they? I'd seen a pic going viral on Sunday night. Actually, it was the Glastonbury drone.
Yeah, Melton. All the former Watford managers.
All the former Watford managers.
Yeah, I like that.
I mean, what odds would you give at this stage now that Valérien Ismaël is still the Watford manager when Boro play them on the final day?
Yeah, you'd want massive odds, wouldn't you? You'd want massive odds.
Yeah, I mean, you look at them on paper and think, well, yeah, I don't think you do on paper, really, actually, when you look at the team. But probably historically, it's probably historical bias to think, well, Watford are going to be in the mix. Ismaël is actually, like, he's a bit of an unknown as well, isn't he? Because obviously he did that remarkable job at Barnsley. Didn't work for him at West Brom. So he's got obviously something to prove there. But it's no use. Yeah.
They're a complete unknown because, like you say, you would imagine with Watford, the last remnants of that kind of Premier League team are going to disappear this year, and you'll be left with a squad that doesn't necessarily have the names in it, but actually might hang together a bit better than the one that Chris Wilder was moaning about at the end of last season, saying they weren't trying to be. But anyway, that's Watford. Let's stick with Boro. Now transfers, Dom. I mean, the first thing we have to say is we're not even into July yet, so we're still at an extremely early stage of the summer, and clearly there's plenty of things going on in the background. We know that talks are happening. We know that there's targets there, but we do have to say that Boro haven't made a signing as yet. There's no one fresh through the door. I suspect they probably would have hoped to have got someone in by this stage for the start of pre-season training. It hasn't happened. Is that any worry, or are we way too early to start thinking, well, where are these new players coming from?
I think, in an ideal world, you'd have one or two players in by now. But I don't think it's a worry. I was looking at, I was going through the championship a couple of days back, and this is 2 or 3 days old now. But at that stage, I think 11 other championship clubs hadn't made a signing yet. So when you throw Boro in the mix, that's half of the division who haven't yet made a signing. So I don't think it's a concern. I think what's kind of curious, and over the weekend, out and about and chatting to people as you do, and a couple had said kind of any rumours then, and no, that's fair dues. The fact that there hasn't been a signing yet, that's I don't think that's kind of out the ordinary, but it's the fact that really, other than Carl Darlow, who we know is obviously a major goalkeeping target, there haven't been any names or targets. Now, that is credit to Boro, really, that they've managed to keep these names under wraps, because what's the alternative? They're not in for any players, and well, we know that's not the case.
That's not yet.
So it's credit to Boro and the kind of circles, I guess, they're dealing with, because half the time, you know what it's like with transfers, it's not the club that gets the name out there, it's the agent. And the fact that hasn't even happened, I think is rare, really. So at this stage, we're sitting here now, we're late June, and it's kind of hard to know like what to expect of Boro's window in terms of what type of player and where they're going to get them from. Is it going to be Premier League players who maybe need to take, young Premier League players who maybe need to take a step back to then springboard forward? Is it players from a league below? Is it players from overseas? At this stage, really? And again, as I say, it's probably credit to Boro. We don't really know, do we?
No, we don't. And I think it lends itself to a couple of interesting things. So the first thing I would say on that, you're absolutely right. So Sunderland, who obviously we also cover, they've made 4 signings. Now, one of those signings, Joe Bellingham, obviously from the Championship, we've known about for kind of weeks and weeks and weeks. It's been lined up. The name was out there. We kind of knew that the interest was there and what was happening. They then pulled a player called Jensen Seelt out of an absolute rabbit from a hat. He came from PSV Eindhoven's reserve team, and literally nobody had heard a whisper about it until the moment that Sunderland confirmed it. And we were all scrambling around Google and to find out what earth he was. So it does make me wonder the fact that there's not really any whispers around Boro, which you're absolutely right, there isn't. Does that mean that they're targeting, players further afield, perhaps, abroad, perhaps, where the agents aren't necessarily in English journalist ears? We don't necessarily know them. There's not the whispers out there, because I do feel if they were targeting a whole host of players from the Championship, we'd be hearing bits and bobs more than we are at the minute. Is that fair, or is that overthinking it, do you think?
I think absolutely on that last case, because as an example, January, Dan Barlaser. Now, in that example, Rotherham didn't want to lose him but obviously they were in the position where he was out of contract at the end of the season, so it was kind of inevitable, really. But it was pretty clear from early on, wasn't it, that Barlaser wanted to join Boro, and it felt like that was going to happen. It just had that inevitable feel about it, didn't it? That at some stage in the window it would happen. But at that stage, we know Rotherham and Boro get on well. We knew that was going to happen, and yet that still snuck out, and there was no reason really for that name to come out. So, as you say, these things inevitably do sneak out, don't they? I think if we look at what we do know, Oh yeah. He's giving me sweets here. So if you see me gnashing on a Harry ball at once, you know why.
Beautiful.
The bribery of a few Harry balls to feed me 10 minutes to finish this video.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope my missus isn't watching or listening. Well, she tells me she doesn't, so I should be all right. I think if we look at what we do know, we know we've talked in the past, haven't we, about the areas that Boro need to strengthen.
Yeah.
We know they want a goalkeeper. We know Carl Darlow's a major target there, and he ticks the boxes, doesn't he? I was told pretty early in the window, really, that Boro are going to be prioritising players who are aged 26 and under, and the what I was told was the exception to that would be what they deem a pretty specialist position. Then it comes out of Boro interest in Carl Darlow, so we know that. So we know that that's the case. I think the other thing is in January.
I think just on Darlow, Dom, you know, I have had a couple of messages in on Darlow saying what's happening there. You know, why isn't this happening? Why is it dragging out? Well, obviously Newcastle as a Premier League club are kind of week behind the Championship, so their players aren't back until another week. And so I'm told that Darlow's decision is probably likely towards the back end of this week or the start of that week, once he's had the chance to kind of get back into the building at Newcastle and have that final chat with I think he'll leave. I think he will leave Newcastle. Obviously, you know, Hull have always been in for him. Obviously, he was there on loan. They'd love to sign him. Blackburn obviously came at this weekend. Everything I'm still hearing is that Boro are still the favourites, all things being equal. So, if I was a gambler, I'd still say I'd probably have a nibble at that happening. But not necessarily in the next couple of days. But I don't think that's anything to worry about. You know, I do think he'll be leaving Newcastle.
And I mean, a couple of things on Darlow. First of all, he's a long-standing target, isn't he? I mean, Boro have looked at him over and over again in recent years. You'll have seen a lot of him for Newcastle, or as much as he's played over the years. What's he like? What if it goes through? What can Boro?
If it goes through, I think he. So, I mean, he's a good shot stopper. He's probably not as kind of proactive and as good with his feet as Stefan was in terms of setting off attacks and everything. But probably more on that side than not, if that makes sense. His strength has always been shot stopping. He's agile. You know, he is a good shot stopper. He's generally positionally pretty good. Like I say, I don't think he's quite as comfortable with the ball at his feet as Stefan would be. And I don't think he's quite as kind of proactive in terms of wanting it to spark attacks. So he probably doesn't absolutely tick that box for Carrick, but he would arguably be as near to it as you're going to get for someone with that kind of experience. And, you know, he is very experienced. I mean, he had quite a bit of experience before he went to Newcastle. Then obviously, you know, he's been in and out of the team with Newcastle, and then he's also had the loan spells, you know, impressed with Hull in the second. He had to bide his time to get in that whole team, didn't he? But once he got in, played really well. So if it went through, I think it'd be a pretty decent signing for Boro.
And Rossini has spoke openly. I mean, he was desperate to get him back to Hull, wasn't he? He talked openly again and again about that at the back end of the season. I think that'd be a boost if Boro got that in. And I think the other thing is, you know, in January, Boro didn't really want to prioritise the loan market, but the kind of hands were forced to a certain extent in that, you know, that they had the opportunity to bring in two cracking young players from Aston Villa. Thanks to, you know, in part due to Aaron Danks' links there, and obviously they chased that up. Now, the summer's different to January, isn't it? In that you've got all the half of the season to plan for the summer, and you're not as forced in terms of time and in terms of the selling club kind of holding all the cards. So although I know that Boro, again, you wouldn't have thought would want to prioritise the loan market, I think it wouldn't surprise me if loan players did come in still. But I think in an ideal world, what you'd have is a position where even if they did bring loan players in, there wouldn't be as many as last year. And they'd perhaps be there with an obligation or an option at the end So you don't find yourself a year down the line kind of losing 4, 5, 6 players again. I think the other thing there is this season it was slightly different in that last summer was a muddled window, wasn't it? Because of all that was going on.
Yeah.
Whereas January, we saw there was a lot of clarity and clear thinking, and you'd expect that to be the case again this summer. So I don't expect a repeat. I don't expect Boro to be starting the season with six loan players in the squad.
That said, though, do you think that there's any? I mean, obviously, the loan players from last season, at the moment, none of their futures have really been resolved. Stefan's obviously had the knee operation, uncertainty about when he's going to come back. Definitely uncertainty about where he'll be coming back to. Ryan Giles, there seem to be different signals coming out of Wolves every week about Ryan Giles. At one stage, it looked like he was definitely going to be sold. Then it looked like, no, I knew he was probably going to go. Giles was going to be in the team. Now it almost seems to be that they're all going to go to South Korea on pre-season, and whoever comes out on top comes out on top. We've also there got the kind of ongoing uncertainty over Lopetegui's future. And what that might mean for Wolves. So there's definitely uncertainty there. Ramsay always felt like there'd probably be a chance of Boro getting him back at some stage late in the window. Archer, given, obviously he's starring again at the moment for England under 21s in the tournament, doing pretty well coming off the bench for them. Feels like that's probably a ship that's sailed and that he'll get a chance for Villa this season. If he doesn't, he'll get a Premier League move. And then you've still got Moat kind of in the mix as well, and uncertainty about Corbyn's future and will he have a future at West Brom, etc., etc. So in all of those circumstances, really, you can imagine Boro are thinking, well, there's a chance if we want them, we could potentially still get 2 or 3 of them. Then it's a case of, well, do we want them? And if we do, are we prepared to hang on and hang on and hang on and hang on, knowing that we maybe have to put other things on hold in case these players can come in, but actually they are the first choice of ones we'd want. It's a little bit of an awkward dynamic, that, isn't it?
Yeah, and when you go through, I think you look at Stefan now, you would think that ship sailed, especially if the Darlow thing comes off. If not, and if you get to the end of the summer and Stefan still hasn't gone anywhere and he's worked his way back to fitness after this knee op, then never say never. But at the minute, given what we know about Darlow, that feels unlikely. And I agree with you, when you go through, the only one that feels, or the one that feels, if not probable, then certainly very possible, would be Ramsay, wouldn't it? Because I agree with you, and we said it on a number of occasions last year, didn't we? That Ramsay's slightly behind Archer in terms of his progression. This was his first loan spell in the Championship, and it was injury hit, as was the case at Norwich in the first half of the season, whereas Archer had impressed at Preston before coming to Boro, hadn't he? And you do feel that if Archer wasn't going to play at Villa, then you would look and think, well, the logical next step would be a Premier League loan move. I guess the only thing there, and it's probably if you're coming at it from a Boro perspective and you're maybe trying to convince yourself that if they want to know that he's guaranteed to play and they've liked what he's seen from Boro, then you wouldn't absolutely rule it out. But I agree with you that Archer feels unlikely. Ramsay at this stage feels possible.
So they're back in pre-season training today. I mean, obviously, the first week back tends to be physical stuff, bleep tests. Tony Pulis having them up hills in Austria, and goodness only knows what Neil Warnock had them doing. But Carrick, you would imagine, it'll be physical stuff. It'll be assessing at what level the players have come back. I mean, you speak to anyone around football clubs now, and they will say that kind of gone are the days when players rock up for the first day of pre-season and it's been clear they've been sat for 3 weeks, eating and drinking whatever they want in some pool somewhere in Dubai or whatever. Now, they all have their fitness regimes. They'll have gone away with fitness things to do. They're all pretty diligent and everything. So the first week, obviously, easing itself in, but it's not actually that long until we're kind of into games. And obviously, interestingly, this time, while Boro are going abroad on a training camp, they're not playing abroad. So actually, there's quite a number of pre-season games round and about for fans to get their teeth stuck into this time round, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a game abroad, but it's a behind closed doors.
Behind closed doors.
So it's not local friendly. Yeah, they're going to Portugal and they are playing a game, but there's no eyes on that, obviously. It's one of them where you might not even get to find out the result, although you probably will if they win. Which
Depends
is
if they win, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Things, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think what you're saying there about the kind of fitness and the return back and the step up. Having spoken to people since Carrick came in, I think what the players have been impressed with and the staff is that even when they're doing the fitness work in training, there's a football side to it. It's still it's still very specific. So
it's not simply a case of set off running, get to that forest, come back, and the last one back does 20 press ups. It's moved on a little bit from that, hasn't it?
And I think, I sometimes think that, you see how many examples are there of managers who've been out of the game playing wise for decades and decades, and they still have enormous success. But I do think it helps when a manager has not long been out of the game, and that they have maybe a bit more of an understanding as to what players kind of like and what makes players tick and what makes them what the modern player wants. So, but fitness wasn't an issue for the Boro team last year. I don't think there was any doubt, when we questioned at the end of the season as to why maybe things didn't go to plan. It was never really an issue of, had Boro burnt out, was it physically? No. I think it was more the kind of mental side of reaching the playoffs and then turning it off and turning it back on again. But we won't go over all that again. The first pre-season friendlies, 2 weeks, two and a half weeks away?
Yeah, that's all. And just a last one. There was a point towards the end of last season where I think we were wondering if this summer was going to be dominated by discussions over Michael Carrick's future. West Ham links, Tottenham links, etc., etc. That all now looks put to bed, doesn't it? Which has got to be a good thing for Boro. Now, let's get to the start of the season when Premier League clubs start sacking bosses. If Boro are going well, I'm absolutely sure that Michael Carrick will be seen as one of the next cabs off the rank. He's established that reputation for himself already. But at least we're not having to deal with that this summer, are we? Of our club sniffing around him. Is it actually going to be Carrick there on the first day of the season? I think we all know. We can all be pretty comfortable in the fact that that's signed, sealed, and delivered.
100%. And I think the one there was West Ham, wasn't it? Yeah, 2 minutes.
Yeah, West Ham winning that trophy and putting that to bed.
Because although there was the Tottenham links, that always felt a real long shot, didn't it? At this stage, West Ham felt the one where not that it would happen, but if they didn't win that trophy and if they felt it was time to part ways with Moyes, then the Carrick links were inevitable, weren't they? And that interest was undoubtedly going to mount. I think them winning that trophy ended any speculation of Moyes moving on. And like you said there, it benefits Boro enormously because the last thing you want, even if Carrick and his people have made it clear they're not interested in that, it just helps, doesn't it? Not having that going on in the background.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. So there we go. We've had a little bit of chat. You get back to Peppa Pig, Dom.
I was going to say, no, it's Matilda the musical.
Matilda the musical.
It's just come on Netflix. So the good thing about that is we'll watch it about 3 dozen times in the next 3 or 4 days.
Absolutely beautiful. I've got to say, mine are safely packed up at school. Mine are a bit older than that. So, working from home gets a little bit easier when they're like 12 and 10. But anyway,
honestly,
we digress.
If I turned the camera around now and showed you the state of this living room, and I think it's only 11:15 in the morning, God knows what it's going to be like come 4 o'clock.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Dom. Thanks everyone for listening along. As I say, any comments, any questions, any thoughts, either drop us a line on Twitter or any of the other social media channels. Send us an email or comment directly onto this video. We'll be back hopefully at the end of this week with a special Boro guest. And as I say, we have got another couple lined up for the rest of the summer, and we'll intersperse them with chatting about transfers and pre-season games and everything like that. But for now, enjoy the sunshine. Get your diaries out, get your fixtures planned, those away trips sorted, and we'll see you soon for another episode of You Are My Boro.